knowing that, at some point there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, and how your particular individual portfolio is positioned to handle it.
Well, we talked a little bit about stocks. What about mutual funds? Exactly explain that to our listening audience, what a mutual fund is.
Yeah, so actually back at my office, I keep a bundle of colored pencils. And on each colored pencil, we'll say the green one, it's labeled Apple. And then the orange one's Google. I have another one, Johnson & Johnson, Duke Energy, whatever it may be. And I have them all bundled together. That represents a mutual fund. It's picking different, not only stocks, but also bonds and different investment vehicles. And essentially it puts it into one bundle. So you're not bearing the risk of, say, one company were to break. So that's whenever I pull out a colored pencil and I'll break it in half. Something happens to that company. If it breaks in there, there's still other companies backing it and supporting it.
So it's not only important what companies are within that mutual funds, but who the manager is too.
Correct.
Because whoever's managing that funds, they have to make those decisions on whether to keep it or sell it and so forth. So that's probably something that you keep your eye on who the managers are and so forth. So that's another thing. The mutual funds, that gives you a little bit more diversity. Because what they say, never put all your eggs in one basket, right? Now, the other thing is the IRAs, the Roth IRAs, the pre-taxed IRAs. Explain a little bit about the IRA and which one you use if you need a tax write-off for upcoming tax season, or which ones you might want to consider down the road for retirement.
I like to think of IRAs pre-tax, post-tax.
Okay.
Your traditional IRA, that is pre-tax money. And so that's whenever it comes right from your paycheck a lot of times, and you haven't been taxed on it. And that is what you can use in a lot of cases. You have to ask your own CPA, but you can use that as a tax deduction because you're contributing today for your retirement later on.
Is that when they always say just before tax season? I think you have to do it, though, a couple months before. You can do a contribution to help with your taxes. And what is it up to now? Is it $5,500 per person if it's in a couple?
Yes. And then what happens then is that, so you can use that as a deduction. So that's your traditional IRA. And you can still do the 2016. You can make your contributions up until April 15th.
April 15th. Okay. So then you have the pre-tax. That's before taxes, and that's the one you can buy to take advantage of your tax.
Yes. And then, however, whenever you reach retirement or the age you start withdrawing, that's whenever you pay taxes on it.
So the idea is if it's pre-tax and then you withdraw when you're retired, you're in a different tax bracket.
Correct. You're typically in a lower tax bracket when you retire. So that's the advantage of contributing now and not having to pay taxes on it
and then
now.
So the post tax would, now I thought I had heard somewhere that on the post tax, if you're, and is that the Roth IRA?
This is a Roth IRA, correct.
So the Roth IRA, which is post tax, you're going to pay for the tax now, but even if it goes way up in value, you still don't owe any more tax on that.
Correct.
So you're kind of hedging your bet there a little bit because then you don't have to pay taxes at all if it's doubled or tripled or quadrupled by the time you take it out.
A lot of people really try maxing out their Roth each year. So
what is the maximum they can?
It's $5,500 as well.
That. Okay. You've been listening to Coleen Quick with Edward Jones, and we're so happy to have her here because we're talking about women's issues and women's finance because this is National Women's Month. Let's talk about diverse portfolios. You hear that used a lot in various conversations. What is a diverse portfolio?
Obviously, we talked about this earlier, but essentially not putting all of your eggs in one basket.
Okay,
and a lot of times it's not just diversifying between stocks and bonds and mutual funds and cash and your fixed income, but also whenever we're looking at the stock portion, we diversify in that area. When we're building a CD ladder, we diversify with that using different maturities, different coupons. Diversity ranges all over the board.
Okay. Well, we've already discussed that women are making less money, and now we're living longer. So how do we get money set aside for us to live on when we're by ourselves? So we're up against the wall here. How are women affected with their 401k contributions? Is that something that we are seeing as a problem coming up?
Well, one of the problems that women face today is that they are not able typically to work as long as men are, because they often take time off for whenever a child is born. And now we have the sandwich generation who are taking care of their parents as well as their own kids growing up.
Right.
So whenever they work fewer years, that means they have less time to contribute to their 401k at work.
So they can't really, and those 401ks don't stay with you once you leave a job. They only last about a year or something, I think, after that.
Well, there's every 401k company is different. You can leave it, you can roll it. There's different options that you have. But the biggest thing is that whenever women work fewer years than men, they're not able to contribute on those years when they're not working.
What do you think some ideas would be to overcome some of these challenges?
Well, for one is to invest for growth, depending on your age and what situation you're in. But a lot of studies have shown that women may invest less aggressively than men. And if you invest mostly in conservative vehicles, you may run the risk of falling short of your financial goals. And to achieve these goals, you'll need a reasonable amount of growth potential in your portfolio.
Now, I know we can't really talk about necessarily what stocks are growing right now, but in general, what is considered a growth stock? Does that fall into a certain category, or is it like a conservative stock, or how do they rate a growth stock?
A growth stock is rated by analysts of seeing what their performance has been for the last 10 years and what they project it to be for the future as well. And then so we balance with growth stocks, and then we also have stocks that are paying dividends. And right now, especially with individuals who are retired but still want to be able to be growing with their portfolio, they use dividend-paying stocks as a vehicle that helps get them some growth, but also that constant dividend coming in.
Well, we've been talking a little bit about women working, but how do we get prepared for retirement? Because sometimes when we're retiring younger, maybe we're retiring at 65, and now we got 20-some years that we have to make sure we have money set aside. And as well as we might want to use some of that retirement money to take a vacation or a journey or one of the things on our the French Riviera, as you said, wherever. So what are some of the things that you think are good ideas as far as what you need to do to start looking at the future? I know the younger you start, the better, but if let's just pull something out of the air here. If you're a woman of 40 years old and you really don't have a good portfolio right now, of course, the first step would go sit down with a financial advisor. We know that. Sit down with a financial advisor and let's see where you're going with that. But would you have kind of an idea what you would want to put her in or a couple in to get as much growth or get some stability so it will make sense in 20 years that they'll have a little bit of a nest egg? It's not going to be as big as if they would have started at 20 years old, but it's never too late to invest, but you have to invest more as you get older.
Right. It's definitely never too late. And one of the biggest things that my dad taught me growing up was pay yourself first. So make sure that with every paycheck that you're putting some money aside for retirement.
Exactly. And you can have that come right out of your paycheck too, because then you don't miss it.
Right.
Everybody always says, yeah, well, I'll write a check to myself and I'll send it off to the financial advisor. But
the old saying, use it or lose it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Is there kind of a magic formula that, you start off with? Maybe if you're in your 20s, you're putting away 5 or 10% of your income, and as you get older, you're putting away a little bit more? Or is there no, I know, again, everything's on a one-to-one basis, but how would you feel about answering that question to somebody that came in?
A magic formula. I don't think it's necessarily there's one particular formula, one size fits all. I think one of the things that I like to do with everyone who I sit down with is create a budget, because essentially you don't know where your money, I mean, we think we know where our money's going, and it's amazing how people, they sit down and do the budget worksheet. They're like, there's no way we just spent $500 at the grocery store this month.
Exactly.
Or wherever it may be, because a lot of times you can actually be contributing more to retirement than what you actually think you can.
Exactly. And sometimes I think it's easier if you start small and you don't miss it. Mm-hmm. And then every 6 months or every year, just bump it up a little bit more and a little bit. Instead of trying to say, I'm going to set aside 25% of my income every month. Well, that's probably not going to happen. But sometimes 3 or 4 or 5%, you don't even miss it.
Right.
And then you kind of ease into it. I think that would be kind of an interesting ladder, just showing maybe how people could just do 1% a year or 2% a year.
It's amazing what you can do. And that's why we're so big on, one, knowing people's risk, because everyone has completely different comforts with risk. And then also going through the budget, making sure each individual, each couple knows how much they're spending, and then having a plan as to putting X amount away each month, knowing where every dollar of that is going. And then knowing whenever you reach retirement, or even if you're already in retirement, what your money's doing and why, and that you're on track for achieving goals. It's all because, I mean, I'm a runner, and I think about the marathons I've done. And if I don't have a plan of attack and know exactly how many miles I'm doing on what day, where, when, then race day, it's just, hope it goes well. But versus whenever I am very structured and know what's happening, how many miles, all of that. I like to think of it the same way with investing and planning for retirement, or already being in retirement, just sticking with that plan, having that peace of mind of, this is what I'm doing and this is why.
There's some investments that you can borrow against and take money out as long as you put it back in within a certain specific time. And there's other investments that you don't really want to have to touch because you'll get penalized and too expensive to be penalized. Am I making sense? What kind of investments that you can actually still, I think 401ks you can borrow against, but you have to put it back in within a specific time. But there's also some different funds and stocks and so forth like that too. Is that right? Or am I making this up? Though there probably is some things. You just have to look at the whole picture. That's why it's so important to sit down and find out. If you're going to feel like you're going to need to pull money out of your financial portfolio, that's the things that Coleen needs to know. If you're going to have to maybe pull some money out because you don't want to have it tied up into a fund that does not allow any kind of contributions being paid before the mature date or at a specific time. So those are all the kind of things that are so important to know when you're getting ready to start investing if you haven't already. So if someone wants to come in and sit down with you and let them just give you let them have an overview of their financial picture. Maybe they don't have anything right now. What would you like to see them come in with? Do you need some a budget, a couple bank statements? Do you just need to have them write some things down? Do you have a kind of a checklist of things that you provide to them that they need to bring in to sit down with you so it makes it a little easier for their first meeting?
We use a systematic process for the first time we meet with somebody. And so essentially, like I mentioned earlier, we go through their risks, what their goals are, what they're spending now, what they want to spend in retirement, if they're already retired, what they're spending, and then what they're taking out each month, making sure that we know their systematic withdrawal rate. And then a lot of times, if they already have an old 401k, we'll look at how that's invested, or say they have their money at a bank and they're not sure, they invested it 20 years ago. They're like, I just kind of left it there. I haven't changed anything. What we do is I'll put it into our portfolio rebalancer, and it'll show, you are, 70% in equity right now, and you're 70 years old. We should maybe be shifting some things around so that it aligns with your risk and your stage of life.
Exactly. So that's what do you do? Have people come in on a semi-annual basis to take a look at what their situation is now? Just make sure you update their
semi-annual, and then I also like to call once a quarter just to let them know how performance is doing, as well